Hey guys, how is everybody doing? We have finally reached to the eighth Nightmare on Elm Street movie, Freddy vs. Jason. And technically, this is my first Friday the 13th review. I'm not going to be reviewing those movies anytime soon. I'm probably going to review them when the Crystal Lake TV series comes out. But when we get to those, you'll see my thoughts on those. But Freddy vs. Jason is a very strange movie. It's not just important to the horror subgenre, but it's also important to me. I remember this movie like it was yesterday when I first found out it ever exists. When I was a little boy, where this was before I knew about like Amazon and eBay, where when I first found out that this movie existed, I basically went through every store I could. Now, this was before I found out about Amazon and eBay. I went to every store there was available in my town. I went to Kmart, Walmart, Hastings, you name it. I went there. I never found this movie. But then one day, my mom, who had this friend where she was my babysitter, where I would go to this like preschool thing where for older kids. It wasn't. There's literally 4-year-olds there, and she took me over to her friend's house to do whatever the fuck. Really, I don't really know. And I remember seeing a copy of Freddy vs. Jason there, and basically my heart grew like the size of the Grinch. Like my chest, like felt like it just exploded from excitement when I saw that copy. I was like, "Holy shit! I finally found it!" And then my mom's buddy who said like, "Yo, yeah, you can borrow the movie," and my mom took me home, and I was like, "Mom, can we watch this?" And it was like late at night. I want to share you that, and this was on a school night when I was in first grade, and then she's like, "No, no, it's late. We should probably wait until tomorrow after school." And I basically went, "Mom, no. If I don't watch this movie now, it's gonna be on my mind for like the rest of my life." And then she was like, "Okay, put it on." And let me tell you, this was one of the first nights of my life where I stayed up until like at least 10:30. For a first grader on a school night, that's basically staying up to past like 6 a.m. at this point. And it was one of the best horror movies I saw. I'm gonna say it now. And this movie has a huge history too, where ever since Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th came out in the 80s, where Friday the 13th basically dominated the horror movie box office back when it came out, making like 30 to 40 million dollars and everything, until this little horror franchise called Nightmare on Elm Street came along and basically pushed it to the side like it was like the new like Nightmare on Elm Street basically became the new kid on the block and basically became the new popular kid during the 80s. And seeing the success, and Paramount saw the success of Freddy Krueger and talked to New Line and tried to get a Freddy vs. Jason movie made, but that never worked out. And it wasn't until the late 80s where New Line Cinema finally got the rights to Jason Voorhees. And then for almost 20 years, this movie went through 18 drafts, 18 different scripts by 12 different screenwriters. And it's basically amazing that this movie ever got made. Like, I would not be sitting here right now if this movie basically blew up the internet when it first came out. Like, when this movie was announced, like, this movie was fucking hyped to shit. And let me tell you, it is probably one of the most underrated horror movies ever made. With that all out of the way, here are my positives on Freddy vs. Jason. Starting off with my positives on Freddy vs. Jason is that whole opening sequence. To me, the first like 20 seconds of this movie could have been a great opening to start off the original Nightmare on Elm Street. In a way, I'm also kind of glad they didn't to keep the character a mystery, because that's what I love about the first movie, is where it kind of keeps Freddy Krueger a mystery, where you as a viewer with the characters kind of also figure out who he is. But again, we're not here to talk about that movie. We're here to talk about Freddy vs. Jason, where Freddy Krueger, where this whole movie just opens and you just see him when before he's burnt, making this little blade, and then he's just like, "My children," from the very beginning, and gives like this whole opening monologue where like kind of giving the viewers like what's happened to Freddy Krueger over the years, like how like what he was before he was burned and what he became after like what he became when he was a dream demon, how everybody feared him, how he was basically a god, and then they figured out a way to forget about him and he disappeared and everything. That whole opening monologue to him talking about his own origins to resurrecting Jason and like telling him to go to Springwood to strike fear into all the children. That whole opening is one of the best openings to a in a horror movie like ever in my mind, and it's a perfect way to open this movie too, where it gives like why Freddy needs Jason and how he resurrected Jason and everything, and why we haven't seen him since Freddy's dead. Well, technically, we saw him in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but that was some weird entity taking the form of Freddy Krueger. I love that whole opening monologue, the whole opening of this movie. It's to me, it's very iconic. Like that whole opening monologue to me is iconic, and nobody talks about it. Why? Also really want to talk about the story of this movie. Like I said, this movie went through 18 drafts just to get this movie made, just to have these two horror icons go to battle. And I would honestly like to read some of the scripts for this movie and where their original stories were, because to me, there is no better way to tell the story is that Freddy has lost his powers. All the Springwood and Elm Street kids have forgotten who Freddy Krueger is. They don't know who he is anymore. Some of the people have never even heard his name before. And the whole town tries to keep his name a secret so nobody will dream about him so people don't go missing. So he decides to resurrect the camp slasher Jason Voorhees to strike fear into everybody in Springwood to think it was him so he can come back. But Jason starts to get a little machete happy and starts to kill a lot more people than he should be, and then Freddy decides to take him out once and for all. To me, that is the perfect way to tell this story. I don't think of any other way how they could have perfected that story between these two horror icons. Yeah, like I said, 18 drafts just to get this movie made. And for years, people wanted these two to go together, but nobody really had a way. And when you kind of look at it now, it's kind of silly. Like, how did they not think of this before? And what other stories did people come up with? I would honestly love to read all the other drafts that these people wrote just to see how, like, they tried to tell this story. I bet it was fucking weird. A lot of people say it was fucking weird. Positive is Freddy Krueger himself. To me, this is the second best Nightmare on Elm Street movie to get that perfect blend of scary Freddy and funny Freddy. Dream Warriors did it best. To me, that's where he was really scary but also really funny. But they also try to capture that here, and they do a good job. If this is the last time we'll ever see the original Freddy Krueger, they ended it on a great note on this Freddy Krueger. I love this version of Freddy Krueger. And to a lot of people, this is the version of Freddy that they think of when they think of Freddy Krueger. Hell, a lot of the images I see of Freddy Krueger is this version of Freddy Krueger with the really dirty sweater, really darker colors on the sweater, like the blades on the knives are longer, his burns are darker. I love the look of this Freddy, and I love that perfect blend where they got that perfect blend again of scary and funny Freddy. And not my, it's close to being my favorite version of Freddy, but I love the look of this Freddy too, just how like just more scary or darker he looks. Like they made him look scary, but at the same time they get him to make him funny, like how he has like sharper teeth in one part where he like becomes like a weird devil thing. I love this version of Freddy. I'm gonna say this now, I'll get to this part later, but I think the practical effects that they use in this movie are pretty good. I feel that this movie was set up to be the best like fight between horror icons, which if you're not gonna have a bunch of gore and practical effects, you're basically putting on a stamp that this movie is gonna suck. Because Friday the 13th is known for its practical effects and how gory their kills are. Every horror movie fan will probably say that some of their favorite kills are from the Friday the 13th movies. Hell, Nightmare on Elm Street has some pretty good kills too, namely from the original movie. And if you're not going to have good practical effects in your movie, then you've already failed. But to me, they do use great practical effects, especially the whole fight scenes between Freddy and Jason, like the part where it was one of the goriest scenes I've ever seen put to cinema. Man, I wish I could have saw this movie in theaters. I love the practical effects. I'm a practical effects whore, by the way. Every time you show me great practical effects, I'll be in your theater day one. Except for you. You weren't playing in my area. Go away. I love the practical effects in this movie. The ones that they do use, I'll get to more about like the effects that they use later on, but I feel that the practical effects in this movie were perfect that they used. Now, the part that we've all come for this movie is the battles between Freddy and Jason themselves. Now, to me, if you're gonna market your movie as Freddy versus Jason and not deliver on their battles, then basically you get a C minus. And I don't think that's a real grade. Is it? I don't know. But the battles in this movie are perfect. Like the first battle between, what I love about the battles in this movie too is that you get to see both sides of it. You get to see the battle in the dream world between Freddy versus Jason in the dream world, and then you get to see in the real world. In the dream world, Freddy has an advantage, but in the real world, Jason Voorhees has the advantage. I love seeing both sides of it. I love seeing the dream world because the dream world version because Freddy's just basically just knocking Jason down like he's like a fucking toy, basically. And like he's just like Freddy gets his arms cut off and then regrows them like it's nothing, and then starts beating the shit out of him, throwing like these weird plates at him, stabbing him with his own machete, just like throwing him around like a ping pong ball in that one scene. So, like that whole scene, he basically just treats Jason like he's absolutely nothing. And then we get to the real world, and then like Freddy's like, "Oh shit, I fucked up." And then like Jason just plows through the guy and everything. I love the battle between Freddy and Jason. They definitely delivered on their title and they definitely delivered on their marketing. To me, if you're not going to do good at that part, then what's the point of making your movie? Moving on to my mixed aspects, and I only have one, is the characters. I don't hate these characters. To me, they're fine, I guess. None of the characters are really noteworthy, and none of the greatest slasher characters out there. Especially like the whole boyfriend dynamic going on. I didn't care about that. But let's be honest. We're here to see two horror icons go hand to hand battle. And if you're gonna hate this movie just because it has bad characters, then what fucking movie did you come to for? Like, seriously, if you came to this movie just to watch characters, you got the wrong movie, bud. I come to this movie to see Freddy and Jason actually fight. But the character dynamic that we get and the character stuff going on besides Freddy and Jason is interesting, and I don't hate it. If I was forced to just watch these characters in a movie, I wouldn't hate that. But to me, I come to this movie just to see Freddy and Jason beat the shit out of each other. And if you come to this movie just to see characters, likable characters, then what movie are you trying to watch? Because, like, no. Moving on to my negatives, and it pains me to say my main negative is Jason Voorhees himself. Jason Voorhees is is one of my favorite horror movie icons ever. And I think every horror movie fan can say that. But it pains me to say that I don't care for Kim Kirzinger in the role of Jason Voorhees. To me, Kim Kirzinger, he's not a great actor. And if you don't know who Kim Kirzinger is, he's the guy who plays Jason Voorhees in this movie. And his job before being in this movie was actually a stuntman. To me, Kim Kirzinger works better as a stuntman than an actor. I have nothing against his performance. I feel he does fine, and I don't think he deserves all the hate that he gets. But to me, he was miscast. His movements are slow. We see his eyes too much to make because Ronnie Yu wanted to make Jason sympathetic. Yeah, we've seen Jason's eyes before, but I would have rather just seen a darker version of Jason. The reason that Jason is kind of more sympathetic in this movie and we actually see his eyes is because Ronnie Yu, the director of this movie, who apparently had never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th movie ever, apparently because he knew that Freddy Krueger was just pure evil, so he tried to make Jason the good guy, so we see his eyes too much, and so I was like, no. To me, they should have just got Kane Hodder back. Kane Hodder even wanted to do the role, but since the Friday the 13th movies that he was in, they all failed at the box office. They didn't fail at the box office. They failed critically, and Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X didn't really do great at the box office, and they kind of blamed that on, they didn't want really bring Kane Hodder back because they felt that he was responsible for that. Why, really? But I would have just loved to see Kane Hodder come back, but they got Kim Kirzinger because to make him taller. Yeah, sure, Jason is more scary when he's taller and has a size advantage, but I would rather just see Kane Hodder back, and it's a shame that he didn't get to reprise his role. So get the fuck out of here about Jason Voorhees being afraid of water. Yeah, we've never seen him been in water, like, ever. Like we didn't see him swim from Crystal Lake to a fucking boat in Jason Takes Manhattan. Totally. We've never seen that. And I actually read, and I, no, well, I didn't read it. I watched the behind the scenes of this movie and the writers of this movie, like, Shannon something, I believe. That was one of their last names. I can't remember their names. And apparently they never wrote that in the script, and that was done by rewrites by the co-writer of this movie, and he wrote down that he was afraid of water, but they initially wrote down to him to be afraid of drowning than afraid of water. Yeah, Jason Voorhees could be afraid of drowning because he drowned as a kid, but why would a giant hulking monster be afraid of water? That makes zero sense, and I don't understand why that's in the movie. I get it because they're trying to make Freddy like find a way to defeat Jason, I guess. But that's all you could come up with? Jason's afraid of water? No. Moving on to my final negative. Is the CGI used in this movie. Now, I am glad to hear that one of the apparently co-producers of K&B Effects, which is led by Greg Nicotero, who's mostly known by the work on The Walking Dead. Apparently, they tried to use as much practical effects as they could, but they ran into issues trying to make certain scenes, so they had to use CGI. I'm glad that they tried to use practical effects, but the CGI used isn't very good and it ages really poorly. But I don't blame it on them. And apparently, Ronnie Yu, that whole ping pong scene where Freddy's like doing this with his glove and just like throwing them back and forth and everything. Apparently, they had a practical effects shot, but then they showed Ronnie Yu the CGI shot, and he said that he wanted that, so they were kind of forced to add some CGI here because of Ronnie Yu. I don't hate Ronnie Yu as the director, but if you were just to add a bunch of CGI, could you have just told him no, because I'm not a big fan of CGI. There's a few CGI shots in here. The one that really stands out to me is the one where the gets crushed by the door and then his blood is CGI. That's every time I rewatch this movie and I see that and I go, oh God, like what the fuck happened? I don't hate that they used a bunch of CGI. Actually, it was barely really any CGI, but the CGI used, it could have done some work, but a few CGI moments here and there never bothered me, and it looked okay. All in all, guys, that's basically it. I adore this movie. This is one of my personal favorite movies of all time. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I will defend this movie until the day I die. I have always loved this movie. I always love watching this movie. This is a movie to me where I kind of have to watch it every year. This is one of those movies where I put it on every year. I love Freddy vs. Jason. And if you don't like this movie, I get it for your reasons, I imagine. But if looking at it as a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I love the movie. But looking at it as a Friday the 13th movie, it's just okay. So if you're a Nightmare on Elm Street fan, then this movie will definitely work for you. But if you're a Friday the 13th fan, I would see your issues, but you'll still enjoy it for what it is. So this is a movie where I definitely recommend that you go out and buy it. What do you guys think about Freddy vs. Jason? Are you like me and this is one of your favorites of all time? Or are you, for some reason, not a big fan of this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you've seen this movie, let me know what your thoughts are on it. If you like this video, like it. If you love to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for my latest videos. But, of course, until my next video, I'll see you next time.